senior staff, and one of the great days of my life, and I hope theirs too. So I still consult with them. That's why I'm here with pleasure. But as I say, I just do the fun stuff now. Go around the country, around the world a little bit, doing consulting and speaking on different topics. This is one that's nearest and dearest to my heart because of my own background and starting in this field. I actually started as a therapist and then set up and ran outpatient programs, and now to this day I still consult with a lot of them. I'm guessing pretty much everyone here has had plenty of classes and seminars and such over the year on identifying the signs and symptoms of drugs, right? How many have had that? And you know that stuff already, right? So this is going to be a little different. You'll still get some of that, but this will be a little different. What I'm going to do in 55 minutes or less is give you a quick graduate course in diagnosing, assessing addiction, okay, and kind of take you through a different way to look at it, and also how to help someone that has it. And that's kind of where I want to start, because as I'm talking about it, I know it's likely you'll be thinking about and someone you know or knew in your family or in the workplace that you know has or had or maybe has a problem with alcohol. As I say that now, how many have dealt with someone in the past with alcohol or drug problems? Okay, pretty much everyone. If not, you will. So that's how I want to take this focus. So just to kind of refresh your brains a little bit, I have a quick quiz for you on this. Okay, so if you just look up, it's real true, false, real easy. First one, true or false, alcohol has the same chemical and physiological effect on everyone who drinks.
No.
Right, smart group already. It changes based on the size. Larger people, smaller people are affected differently. Of course, alcohol, and same with drugs, affects smaller body types much more quickly because of the amount of blood and chemistry and all of that. However, it's just not size. You could have two women with the same size, same body type, and one is affected differently than the other because perhaps of the genetic markers or biochemical reaction to alcohol or drugs. And that's one of the differences potentially between abuse and addiction that we'll go through. Next one, alcohol is an addictive drug. Anyone who drinks long and hard enough will become addicted. No, it's false. Addiction is a disease, and some people get diseases, some people don't. Now, everyone can abuse alcohol, and if you continue to abuse it for long periods of time over the course of your life, you will have physiological effects, meaning it's going to mess up your system in your body, and you know that, right? And by the way, that's one of many things that is unfair to women. Now, women are better than men at lots of things, right? Guys will, we'll confirm that up front, save us a lot of time and trouble. Women are better at many things. One of the things you're better at, though, is becoming addicted faster. On average, it takes someone 7 to 10 years to develop a chronic addiction. Women do it in about 5 to 7 years. And as you know, women, life is unfair. It affects you physically much more quickly than men, right? You see a 40-year-old alcoholic male, he looks 40. You see a 40-year-old alcoholic female, she looks 60, older. The impact physically happens much more quickly with alcohol and drugs, too. So life is not fair. You might want to write that down. Okay, addiction to alcohol and drugs is primarily psychological. True or false? False, right. It's biochemical. It's physiological. There are psychological impacts, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But you're right, you get this part. When a person is drunk or high, they reveal their true personality. True or false? False. Right. You know, people say, oh, he was drunk last night. He really told me how he felt. You know, did you reveal your true feelings when you came out of anesthesia at the hospital? Oh, nurse, I love you. Yeah, no. It's drug effect. Right. If people would only use responsibly, they would not become addicted. False. right? How many people you know got up one day and decided, I'm going to become an alcoholic? Become a addict? No. The effect on systems are different, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. After a prolonged period of drug use, the brain needs more of the drug to get the same effect. True, right? So you all know about tolerance and changes in tolerance. I'm going to show you how that works in a minute too. So, let's start with what might be an easy question, but maybe not. This is not true or false. Now, what is average, or you say normal drinking, but there's really no such thing. What do you consider to be average drinking?
5 drinks a week, maybe.
How many?
5 drinks a week, maybe.
5 drinks a week. Any other guesses? An average of 3 drinks a day or less. So it could be for someone. This average or normal drinking. So you're already thinking, oh, I got to cut down. And here's how an alcoholic or addict thinks. Okay, 3 drinks a day or less. So if I save up for 3 days, you got it. And I can have 12 on Thursday. No.
Friday, come on.
Or Friday, okay, so even save up for Friday. No, that's average. That's average drinking. More than that can become abusive. Certainly more than the average. Or, I said, or the ability to drink alcohol without experiencing adverse consequences. And that's a very key message. It's the same for drugs. The ability to drink or use without experiencing adverse consequences. So you might only have 2 drinks a day or less. But if you're getting in fights, if it's causing problems, if it's affecting your body, if it's having all kinds of other consequences that are negative, that's not normal, is it? And that gets you kind of thinking about, okay, now we're getting into some of the differences between abuse and addiction. And that's what I'm going to get to also. Because I'm talking about alcohol, now with drugs, we can't quite get the same so many drugs per day as normal. But you have to take a look at where are the adverse consequences coming. When do you start experiencing those due to the drug use? And now we're not just talking, as you can see, they've got pills. Not just talking about illegal drugs, which are on the list that the county policy has: marijuana, cocaine, opiates, amphetamines, all of that. PCP, all of those. More common and more difficult to deal with are the prescription drugs and the abuse of prescription drugs. How many have seen someone abusing or addicted to prescription drugs? Yeah, I've had that same. Give you a little bit about my background. We'll talk more about family stuff later. No one gets into this by accident. My father was a practicing alcoholic for the first 17 years of my life, so I grew up with that. I'm sure there's some other folks here who come from an alcoholic or addicted family. Got sober when I was 17. I started talking to him about when I was 20. It all worked out great. We actually worked together for his last 25 years, so it was all good. Now it's even more. He was also abusing prescription drugs at the time, and nobody knew it. Nobody talked about it, and nobody understood. He was in the Coast Guard. He was a corpsman. Okay, so if you know a corpsman, they work in the hospitals and the clinics. He had access. Nobody knew it, covered up. All of that happens. We work with a lot of nurses as well, and have over time. So the issue is, here you're looking at adverse consequences. Because you know folks too that yes, they are on prescriptions, but they abuse the prescription or overuse it. And we've seen lots of folks in doing assessments and treatment of abuse that go doctor shopping and all of that. The governor has a proposal out right now on opioid abuse and addressing that. I don't agree with all the pieces of it, but one of them I do is this idea of moving toward electronic prescriptions, because that'll help eliminate a lot of the doctor shopping that goes on. We've seen that all the time. So, getting back to this, the difference between abuse and addiction. This is where you're gonna get it. Abuse, the person that abuses alcohol or drugs has a choice. They can choose not to use. They can choose to use or drink, have a couple of drinks and stop. Or they can choose to get high. or to get drunk. And make that choice, right? Some folks make that choice at a party or whatever. I'm gonna get blitzed, I don't care. Or I'm just gonna, sit here and smoke pot all day, I don't care. They have that choice. You see that down at NAU, right? That's where alcohol abuse takes place higher than average for that population because it's freedom, it's available, all that happens, let's experiment. And for the vast majority, after college, they start in their careers, they stop, they settle back down to normal use, unless they have an addiction. The difference is those who abuse alcohol or drugs can make a choice. They can choose not to use, they can choose to use normally, they can choose to get high or get drunk. Someone with addiction cannot choose what happens when they take that first drink or that drug. They can't decide, I'm just going to stop at the bar with my buddies after work and have a couple of drinks and go home. They may intend to, but wind up closing the bar and getting hauled off. They may intend just to go to the party and stay for a couple of hours or just have 2 drinks or just, smoke pot once with buddies and stop and wind up passing out or getting sick or whatever. Once they start using or drinking, they cannot predict what's going to happen. That's one sign of addiction, and that, as well as all the other things you're going to see with this. Does this sound familiar so far? Start, folks you know or thought about? Okay, so that's the difference. It's really choice. So, what I'm going to do, that's the undergraduate part, here's the graduate part. There are 2 questions, really. When we do an assessment with someone, there are just 2 questions really that you have to ask to determine whether someone has addiction. Question number 1 is, what happens when you drink or when you use? What happens? We look at the behavior. And I mentioned the first one. I'm going to show you all 3 here. The first one was that loss of control. When you start, you cannot predict what's going to happen, despite intention. That's loss of control. You know how often, how long, etc. And the first one is real key too. They continue to use or drink despite negative consequences. Bad things happen, and they still drink or use, right? They get sick, they get in a fight, they crack up their car. Well, I just have to be smarter about my use. Because it keeps happening, right? You see that pattern. That's a sign of addiction, as well as the change in tolerance that you all got earlier. So we look at loss of control and all the examples of that. We look at things that happen, adverse consequences. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And we look at the change in tolerance. So what do I mean by that? Let me show you a graph, and we're live streaming, so those of you, I'll try to describe it, but you're kind of on your own. So I'll draw a little picture. At the bottom, you see that line, straight line. That's a normal drinker or normal use. And you pretty much know how many here drink. It's okay. Assuming you're not alcoholic, you know what your limit is, right? Now again, if you're not alcoholic, at that point, you can choose to stop, or you can choose to say, I don't care, I'm getting drunk. But it pretty much, you know your limit. And what that limit is the point at which you start feeling the effect of the alcohol. Same with drugs. You start feeling the effect. And normal drinking, I have it there about 3 or 4, it's pretty much the same your whole life. Now, I talk about my wife sometimes, and we've been married 37 years. She knows it. She laughs, and now she just ignores it. That I don't drink by choice. I'll talk a little bit about that later. She's the designated drinker in our family. That's how it's done. But she could never be an alcoholic. She likes wine. She'll have a glass of wine, and she starts feeling relaxed and happy and enjoyable and, getting fun. And she has a second drink, and even more relaxed and all. And about an hour later, she's ready to go sleep. So that tells you 2 things. Number 1, she can never be an alcoholic. It takes a lot more than that. Number 2, timing in our house is very important. That's normal drinker use. This is a bell burning, but that's part of it. For someone that has a problem, an addict or an alcoholic, there's the change in tolerance. You see the curve there. Either when they first start using or very soon after, it takes more and more to get high. More and more to feel the effect. Where in the beginning it might have taken just 2 or 3 drinks, now it's taken 4 or 5 or 6. In the beginning, where it might have just taken a little bit of pot, now it takes more and more to really get relaxed or feel the effects. Same with cocaine, same with opiates. It takes more and more to get the same effect. So you see that increase in tolerance. And I've seen some folks who knew that from the first time they took a drink of the drug. They have a higher tolerance. Think back to high school. Remember the guy or the gal who could really hold their beer, hold their booze, and we all thought, cool. No. Higher tolerance. A sign of potential addiction. That's what that is. And so over time, and as you see, it doesn't take very many years, 3, 4 years for some, you see that increase in tolerance. And after how many, maybe 5 years, 8 years, it varies for folks. It levels off for a period of time where they need 8 or 9 drinks, or they need a lot more of the drug to have that effect. And it only starts decreasing later on when physical problems start occurring. Physiological reactions. They torn up their stomach or their liver, or whatever it might be. That's what change in tolerance is. And that's one of the key signals or symptoms of addiction. Now, how many have heard about blackouts? Yeah, blackouts, it doesn't happen too much with drugs, but certainly with drinking. That's a loss of memory about your behavior while under the influence. It's not passing out. You know, if you have to ask someone whether you had a good time at the party the night before because you don't remember, that's a blackout. And they say, yeah, who's that person you're dancing with? And then you're in trouble. Or worse, who's that person you woke up with? That's blackout. What happens with blackouts, too, for folks that get them, not every alcoholic gets them. And not everyone that gets them is alcoholic, but the correlation is very, very high. And as you continue to drink or use, they tend to start sooner, maybe half an hour if you start drinking instead of 2 hours, and they last longer. For some people, more than a day or 2 days. Years ago in treatment, I had someone who came for treatment because they came to, I mean, they're conscious and functioning, but they came out of the blackout while they were driving on the New Jersey Turnpike. And they didn't know how they got there. We had someone else who came into treatment many years ago, and they had a round-trip plane ticket used from Rome in their pocket. This was in California. And they didn't remember going to Rome. So, sound extreme, but I got lots more stories like that. That's black. That's addiction. So when someone says, oh yeah, I must have had a great time, I don't remember any of it. Symptom. Oh, I can drink a lot, or I smoke pot all day, it doesn't bother me. Symptom. So you become aware of what's happening. So that's the first question we ask. What happens when you use or when you drink? Now, as I'm talking, I know that you maybe think about people you know in the past, or even now, family, friends, coworkers. Good. This is real. So that's the first question. What happens when you drink or use? The second question, and this is the key, does your drinking or drug use cause problems? And let me ask you this. Would you agree that if something causes a problem, maybe it is a problem? And that's all we have here. And think about addiction. If someone told you, you know, every time you eat green beans, it's going to mess up your stomach and make you sick and put dents in your car, might you stop? Yeah. But an addict says, oh no, that's not the reason. Or I can control it. I'll only have green beans once a week. And it happens. That's addiction. So, does it cause problems? Let me show you what we look at when we do that assessment, remember, as to how drinking and drugs are when they cause problems. And this is kind of a chronological list. Remember that as we go through. The first area of a person's life that's affected because of a drug or alcohol addiction is the family. Makes sense, right? You're closest to them. You're more likely to see the behavior, the overuse, the addiction, the consequences of that the next day. And of course, what do we see? Fighting, relationship problems, marital problems, family problems, problems with the kids, separations, divorce, all of that. Because the family is the first area affected. They're closest to the person. Right? The next area is person's social life. We look at that and think about that. You know, if you start to use more and more, who are you going to hang out with? Yeah, other users, people that use or drink like you do. You're not going to hang out with those folks that are questioning you or don't drink or don't use. They're no fun, all of that. So we see a change in friends or a change in social circles. You know, the spouse who says, "No, let's not go out with that couple this weekend. Let's go out with this couple. They're more fun. We can sit back and smoke or drink or whatever we're doing." Or we'll see a loss of friends, right? You get sick in someone's car more than once, you're probably not going to be invited back. Or at their party, or dent their car, or do something. Or they get fed up with trying to help or saying, or get fed up with you and don't want to say anything, they just disappear. So we see a change in social life. The next areas that are affected when we're doing a full assessment, we look at the legal and financial life. Right? As I mentioned, dents, car crashes, accidents, DUIs, those get expensive. Second and third spouses, they get expensive. Having to buy gifts to make up for the fight, that gets expensive. So we look at what's happening in this person's legal and financial life. You know, on the legal side, so we got someone from law enforcement here. What percentage of folks who wind up in the jail are there due to alcohol or drugs?
It's a pretty high percentage.
Yeah.
But I'd say, given just recovery court, we're talking about at least 50%.
Yeah. I've heard as high as 75% sometimes too. And the same for emergency rooms, right? Which we'll get to right now. When we look at the admissions to emergency rooms, those are due to alcohol and drugs. Vast number. When we look at folks when they come into treatment, we get their medical records. And the medical records are that high for someone with an alcohol or drug issue. Not always going in for alcohol or drugs. It could be other things. Gastrointestinal problems, certainly liver problems, other kinds of things, accidents, all those things. So we look at this whole picture and it starts coming together. Now, you also get the reactions that are different from someone with an addiction versus just someone who's abused it or had a problem, right? Someone comes into work Monday morning and they don't look so good. You say, "What, did you have a wild party last night?" They said, "Yeah, we were watching the games and I had too much and I'm paying for it today." Right? That's someone who chose to abuse. Okay, fine. We get that. You say that to an addict or an alcoholic, "Boy, you look like you really had a bad time last night. You know, what's going on?" What do they say? "Oh no. What do you mean? You know? What are you trying to tell me?" Get very defensive, denial. No, nothing happened. Right? That's the difference. You heard about denial and defensiveness. That's how you see it. That's what it is. You know it. And it can happen anywhere to anyone. I've run addiction programs, employee assistance programs, have a lot of counselors, a lot of trainers, staff working for me in the past. We had a trainer years ago that my staff started wondering about, because she'd come in and about every couple of weeks on Monday they'd look at her car in the parking lot and there'd be a brand new dent or something off with the car. And again, you ask somebody, they come in and the car has a dent, what happened? I got sideswiped, or I got rear-ended, or I backed into a pole or something, I'm an idiot, or someone else's fault. But you get an answer. She never gave a straight answer. "Well, I don't really know. I didn't notice it. Well, I think it was this or not." Unfortunately, she was working in a place where you had a lot of addiction specialists. So finally, and it didn't take too long, they started going down the list and said, "Why don't you come in and talk?" And she wound up getting help, actually. But it's all those things. And it can happen anywhere. The next area that's affected is we look at mentally. What's going on with someone's mental health? Because here's one of the keys to that. Now, you'll see depression, you'll see anxiety tied into alcohol and drug addiction, abuse, and all of that. Well, and so that's a key. But we will also see on our end, folks will start developing a history of seeing counselors. And that's when they come into our offices for assessment, all that, or to the EAP offices. And they'll have records there. But it's never about alcohol and drugs. My kids are a problem. My spouse is a problem. my boss is a problem. And it's a lot of excuses, but they finally got to the point where they were referred, even though, or self-referred, even though they're still in denial. Maybe the spouse said, you know, we need to go to counseling or that's it. Okay, I'll go in and try to fake it, you know, and do that whole thing. It takes on average, it's faster now, but it used to take about 7 years for someone with an addiction to get to treatment. But even then, it would sometimes take another 2 years to get to the real heart of the issue, because they come in after 6, 7 years dealing with all those other issues. And it wasn't until they finally were willing to go talk about their addiction, or had to, court referred, or what other reason, or work referred, that it was addressed. The good news is that's happening much sooner now. And folks are getting there quicker because of folks, organizations like this, employers that recognize it, have an EAP, have avenues to get folks help, especially without necessarily them being terminated. It's an option, but it doesn't always happen. But this is the progression we see. Now there's one area of your life that's not on this list yet. What is it? Work. Exactly. That's the last area. What do you see in the workplace that might lead you to think, maybe this person has a problem? Yeah.
High absenteeism.
Absenteeism. Absolutely. Yeah.
Quality of work.
Yeah. Yeah. Quality of work. You'll see all those kinds of behaviors that may or may not be addiction. Okay. Secretive behavior. Certainly if you see them using or passing or, you know, they're the first one that can't wait to get to the bar after work. You'll see all that. But the point is, it's the workplace that's affected. Absenteeism, the quality of the work, the changes in their behavior, the changes in their attitude. You know, that all of a sudden they're tougher to work with, or they're erratic. You know, some days they're the friendliest person, the next day they're, you don't want to be around them. They're what?
Moody.
Yeah, moody, all of that, right. So we see those changes. And here's the key that I want you to remember about. Remember I said this list was progressive? So here's the point. By the time you see these behaviors in the workplace, by the time you see any evidence of alcohol or drug use that's affecting the workplace, chances are over 90%, you're right. This is due to an addiction. Because, remember denial? Someone with an alcohol or drug problem always uses that last line of defense. How can I be an alcoholic? I've never missed a day of work. Or aren't I the best performer here? They're doing everything they can to cover up their use. And what's happening now is they're not able to do that anymore. Despite their best efforts, it's still becoming evident here and there that there may be a problem. So what that means is by the time you even suspect it in the workplace, you're probably right. Because all these things, most of this stuff has already been happening to them, and they can no longer cover it up or hide it, pretend it isn't happening, or control it in any way. And that's the key here. And that's where then you have an opportunity, perhaps, to intervene. I'm not talking about heavy-duty intervention, but to take some kind of action, perhaps, to help. How many have seen, and I'm going to ask for specifics, many have seen behaviors or suspected someone in the workplace with a drug or alcohol problem, either here or in the past? Okay, quite a few. So this is making sense, I hope. You know, if nothing else, it's validating that, yeah, this is what you were seeing. Because then it's hard, isn't it, to think, oh, you know, what do I say? What do I do? Because I don't want them mad at me, right? I don't want to lose a friend. I don't want to cause trouble. And yet, what else has happened? We may be watching someone who may be putting their own life in danger, or a coworker, or someone else. Right? So the larger question is, we'll get into how to a little bit, but the larger question is, do you want to be the person who said something and maybe got them upset, maybe lost a friend? Or you want to be the person who didn't say anything and watch them crack up their car in their head, or run into someone else? Because how many times have you heard people say, Oh, you know, I knew there was a problem. Well, then you had an opportunity maybe to do something. And there's some different ways to add things. I want to ask your thoughts about that too as we go through it. Because this is a drug-free workplace, you do have the policy. I'll review that real quick for you. Well, while I do, is there any questions or examples that you can share about what we've been reviewing here? Make sense? So the policy, pretty straightforward. Don't drink on the job. Don't have alcohol on the job. With drugs, don't use, don't possess, don't transfer, don't have it around, any of that. Don't buy or sell. Don't be under the influence. Okay. Certainly not in any county-owned vehicle, but also not in your own vehicle if you're doing business. County time.
It can alter your life.
Pardon?
It can alter your life.
Oh, it can and it does.
Even
alter
for
your
the
life.
victim.
Pardon?
Even for the victim.
That's right. Absolutely. The other part of the policy which I like is it is strict. It does say that the county will take disciplinary action up to and including termination. But it also says they have the option to refer you to the EAP for an assessment and to get treatment, if appropriate. You pay for the treatment. But essentially that's saying there is the opportunity for a second chance. And that's what I like. That both are possible. So if you see someone, that's possible for them too. If there's an avenue there to help them or for them to get help. Now there's other ways to do that. Because I'm just talking about the EAP for a second, and there's cards there if you don't have the number. The EAP has a 24-hour line, crisis line, and then referral to counseling, face-to-face or by telephone. All of that, when a person calls himself, is completely confidential. The only information that comes back to the county are numbers. It's not even specific to departments, so they're not going to figure out it's a 40-year-old female that works in HR between 9 and 1. It's not like that at all. But when someone calls, when they see a counselor, it's completely confidential. So I want you to know that before you might say something to someone, that there is a place help available. Now there are a couple of different ways to do that, to offer help to someone, or to even say, I'm concerned about your use or your drinking. And that's the message, is that you're concerned. Not, you have a problem. I went to this class yesterday morning and now I know they were talking about you. No. You start with the facts. You start with what you observed firsthand. Here's what I saw last night, and that's what concerns me. I saw you putting down 5 or 6 or 8 beers in 2 hours, or I saw you out smoking pot all day, come into work and you look like hell, the next day, or I saw you using, or I'm concerned about all the prescription bottles that I see you carrying around, etc. And you're kind of out of it. But you describe it. It's first-hand facts. Because you can't argue with that. Here's what I saw. Now, they may tell you that you didn't see that. They'll be online. You can't believe me or your own lying eyes. But that's what you can do. And the message that goes with that is, I'm telling this because I'm concerned about you. I care about it. That's the message. It's kind of like, oh, that's different than this. That's I care about you. And you can offer, if you want to take a look at it, at your use or your drinking or what's going on, here's a resource. Call them confidential, etc. Or if you want to talk to someone. So you offer it that way. You don't have to say, you have a problem and you need to get help and here's what you need to do and I'm right and you're going to kill someone and all that because they've turned you off right away. Here's what I saw. Here's what I'm concerned. Does that make sense? Another way, someone in the previous class said, well, what if you go in and say, you seem really depressed or you seem really anxious. Maybe that's causing your drinking or causing you to use, I don't know. But you may want to do it. Why don't you go think about calling someone and talking about that? There's help available for that. What did I think? And I think I surprised him with my response. My response is, Whatever works, use it. If that gets that person to a counselor, fine, because the counselor's going to know the questions to ask and to dig into it. You know, in most cases, no, it's the addiction that causes the depression and anxiety, not the other way around. But I don't care what gets them there. And so, fine, if that's how you want to get to it, get to it. Great. Because as we said, you want to be the one who says, I tried. I laid it out there, I gave them the option, rather than I wish I had said something. And here's the other thing. You may not be the first person that has said something to them. You may be the fifth or the eighth. And maybe that's the one that says, okay, 6 people have told me I've got a problem or are concerned about me. Maybe I ought to call. They won't tell you that, but you don't know. It's like we used to say in counseling too. If one person tells you you have a tail, you can laugh at them. If 10 people tell you you have a tail, you better turn around and look. And it's the same idea here. You don't know. You have that ability. Whether it's at home, with a family member or a friend, or in the workplace. Especially with safety sensitive is a whole nother level. If you're talking about drivers and CDL, and there's training we'll be doing with supervisors this afternoon too, more about all of this. But for friends and coworkers, we have the opportunity to intervene in that way by saying something. Now, one of the other questions I get all the time is, how do you do that in a culture where so many people drink, or everyone drinks, or so many people use drugs? And that's tough. So let me ask you this question, and see, another quiz. So more quiz questions. What percentage of the population do not drink? What's your guess? 20?
40.
40? 30? So you're going to split the difference. Yeah. You're right. Almost a third of the population don't drink at all. And a higher percentage don't use it all. But 30% of the population don't drink at all. Is that surprising? It seems like everyone does. No. I don't drink at all. When I go to parties, I might have the same cup, but probably Diet Mountain Dew in it, if you know me. So that's okay. And yet, folks sometimes are made to feel like, oh, you have to go along. No. Or you have to be in the culture. No, you have those choices. And there are a lot of other folks, when you start looking around, that aren't drinking. And for a lot of folks are wondering, well, how are they having any fun? They're watching them? I tell you, that gets boring after a while, too. You ever have a conversation with someone who's been using? It's the same conversation. So you see the differences, right? Kind of see where this is going. And there's some other questions or examples that you've seen. All right, so this ties into this last question I want to have you take a look at too, is how do you help? That's what we've been talking about that a little bit now. But that's the key here, is you do have the ability to do that. Doesn't make you responsible for it, but it gives you the opportunity. Doesn't always work out. And I'll share kind of a good story, a negative story. The negative one first. I'm a kind of mentions I come from an alcoholic family. And the tendency toward addiction is higher when you come from family addiction. There's genetic reasons, physiological reasons, as well as probably behavior reasons that you see. 4 kids in my family. And different things happen. My brother, I'm oldest, I have a sister and 2 brothers. The middle brother became addicted. He was addicted to cocaine. He was an addict. He used other stuff too, 20s, 30s, stopped around 40. He got clean. He's been great ever since. He's an instructor down at community college. Does law from Tucson down there. That's great. My youngest brother was never addicted. Never used like that. Never had a problem. He had a back problem, and that also runs in families. How many share that with you? Isn't that fun? Yeah. Well, he wound up having to get the surgery and all that, and he had a doctor who I do not want to see on the street, who prescribed opiates, overprescribed opiates. And my brother became addicted. Now, did he have a responsibility for that? Yes, because once he became addicted, he started seeking the drug. And it killed him. Accidental overdose. Found him in his bathroom about 4 years ago. He was my youngest brother. Okay? He never used all that time, but because it can happen to anyone, but he had a predisposition. And once he started using this opiate, kicked in. And I'm guessing because of that background, he had a higher tolerance. See, I don't drink at all. I never liked it. And that's what happens sometimes in alcoholic families. You go to the other extreme. You know, they'll say, oh, I'm never going to touch a drug. I'm never going to drink. Well, that's not healthy either. You have to kind of develop an understanding about drugs are not good or bad. They're substances, and it's what you do with them, etc. And I've worked in the field, so I know that. But I went to the other extreme with that. And that's kind of what you have to watch for as well. Because you see it in families. You see the differences there. But in all cases, the key to breaking through any cycle is to speak up. And working with family members, particularly, what family members have going on in their head is that you don't talk about it, you suppress any emotions about it, and you certainly don't trust anybody. So if you're dealing with younger folks, if you have families, if you have kids, you talk about it. I bring this up because with our kids, with my daughter in particular, we shared the family history. Here's the background here. So here's the things you have to be aware of. I'm not telling you not to drink or use. But here's the things to be aware of. Here are the facts. Here's how you see it. Here are the signs to look for in other people, just like we're doing here. And she wound up being able to help a couple of friends in high school and one in college, where she saw the behavior and actually talked them into getting help. So you can do that. Rather than being the one that says, I wish I had said something. Any other areas that you'd like to cover before we wrap up? So, I hope what this has done is kind of reminded you or brought back for you that you know more than you thought you knew about this. And what you're seeing is legitimate. And you have the opportunity to help someone when you see it. The worst that can happen is you lose a friend, maybe they don't talk to you anymore. But even worse than that is you don't say anything and there's an accident or a death. And you say, I wish I had said something. Don't take that option. Because in most cases, and I've had this happen too, people hate me when I say it, do that, and then later on they come back and say thanks. And that's what you'd like to have happen here. We have a responsibility, I believe, to the people that are closest to us, and that can be coworkers too. So with that, I want to thank you for asking questions and participating this morning, and I hope you have a great week. We're finished.